Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina, and on behalf of Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Enhancing Discovery and Accessible Research Pathways Through Metadata, which is sponsored by AM. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now, I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming webinars and watch previous webinar recordings. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We've got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to submit any questions or comments for our speakers. We'll answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation, so please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC or Show Captions button on the bottom panel of your screen. You can also turn on automated translation for the captions by clicking the arrow button, toggling on translation, and selecting your preferred language. Last, please note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with links to the recording and today's slides. And with that, we're ready to get started. So I am going to launch a quick poll question and hand it over to our first speaker today, Hannah.
Hi, thank you. So I am just going to introduce the speakers today from AM. So I'm very delighted to introduce my our two colleagues. Each of us work at AM directly with digital primary sources. So we're involved in managing or generating and disseminating metadata to enhance the discoverability of the primary sources that we work with in AM collections. My name's Hannah. I'm the Associate Director for Editorial Production at AM, and I'm joined by two colleagues, Gail Beadnell, who's our Publishing Manager for Metadata and Discovery, and Jennifer Wedge, who is our Metadata and Discovery Manager. Our agenda for today, I'm going to give a brief introduction to AM and our sort of primary source collections, just a bit of who we are, and then I'm going to talk about how we partner with archives, hopefully kind of give a bit of a context for the detail that Gail and Jen are going to give later. Then Gail's going to kick us off by talking about how we go from the archive catalogue to digital discovery, as well as looking at accessible and inclusive metadata. Then we're going to hand over to Jen, who's going to talk about creating metadata specifically for library systems from the primary sources that we work with. And then I'm going to round off just talking about some interesting pilots that we've been doing to enhance discoverability through AI-driven processes. So as I said, a little overview of AM. Our focus is and always has been primary sources. We license and publish sources in focus collections for use by research institutions. And we also have a proprietary platform, AM Cortex. That's what we use to publish our collections, but it's also a solution that's used by many archives who publish their own digital collections. We've been working in this space, partnering with libraries, archives, and different heritage institutions for over 30 years now. At AM, we spend most of our time thinking about how people actually use archives and primary sources, and how to make that experience a bit easier, a bit richer, ideally. And for more than 3 decades, we've been working alongside libraries and archives to help bring those collections online. We are an independent publisher. We're part of the Sage Group and their Independence with Impact business model. And as I said, focusing entirely on primary sources and the technologies that help users explore the teaching and research potential that they have. Our platform is built for discovery. It's not just a display platform, and a lot of work goes into accessibility and engagement because it's wonderful digitizing sources and it's wonderful being able to help kind of preserve facsimiles, but actually disseminating the sources and facilitating the journey into the research ecosystem brings value not just for the source institution, but for the scholarly community at large. And that's what we're really passionate about supporting. So in terms of how we work with archive partnerships and where metadata kind of comes into that, the metadata is a really central tenet of how we partner with archives and how we build really clear learning and teaching pathways through the content to enhance the primary sources themselves. It's one of the first questions we ask when we're researching a potential collection for licensing for digitization, and it tends to define a lot of the processes that come after. We have a really highly collaborative relationship with the archives and libraries that we source content from, and that includes sharing a keen understanding of the format, the quality, and the completeness of any records that do exist for a collection. Um, we have a high respect and understanding for the provenance of the catalogue information, and that's really important to inform our processes. And once we've licensed the content and we've agreed to digitize and publish, we then begin the process of transforming and enhancing the catalogue data into richer, standardized and interoperable records that serve the needs of our customers and end users in the range of platforms that they might be accessing the content through. Within AM, we have a dedicated metadata and discovery team in-house. They are led by Gail, who you'll be hearing from. And that in-house skill set is really vital for bringing library-centric technical expertise to our processes, as well as ensuring we have consistency across our publishing program. So then just a very top level overview of how metadata fits into our editorial production workflow. Gail will be speaking to these processes in more detail. So this is just like a visual for you. But essentially our goal is to work collaboratively with our archival partners to take the content through these steps and produce output that supports those teaching and learning goals, as well as compliance across the diverse content and diverse systems that we work with. And now I'm going to hand over to Gail.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here today. As you can see, my name's Gail Beadnell, and I'm the Publishing Manager for Metadata and Discovery. And I'll be talking to you for the next 15 minutes or so about AM processes, how we create the metadata in our collections, elaborating on Hannah's last slide from archive catalogues to digital discovery. So within AM collections, you'll find resources in many different formats. The textual materials cover traditionally published items, so monographs, periodicals, maps and government documents, but there are also unique manuscripts and drawings. In addition, some collections contain audiovisual files, photographs and objects. And the mission of the metadata and discovery team is to make AM's vast and varied collections easier to explore and understand. So we're connecting scholars and researchers with the full range of content types across our diverse collections. Our work presents archival materials as accessible digital resources that support engagement, teaching and research worldwide. Accurate and targeted metadata is a key driver of content accessibility and discoverability, linking the resources across subjects and formats. And this enables researchers to uncover resources both within and beyond their initial field of interest. The detailed metadata within the collections is further manipulated into MARC records for library customers to ingest into their discovery services. And my colleague Jen will be talking more about this later. And we also ensure a consistent approach to aid cross-collection searching through AM search. So what may be surprising is that rather than a traditional cataloging environment, the majority of our work takes place in spreadsheets. So working at collection level can mean processing thousands of assets at a time rather than cataloging individual items. So working at this scale, it's essential that the metadata is accurate, comprehensive, and fit for purpose. And we achieve this with a blend of manual processes, automation, and human oversight. So the metadata journey for each collection begins with assessing what existing catalogue data is available from the source archive or library. And this data comes to us in many formats, for example, via a library catalogue. It could be a web page or a PDF document. There could be a file of MARC records or a traditional printed catalogue, and we will work with whatever is available and comes our way. We audit the data. We consider what information has been recorded or not recorded. Is it in a standard format? Is any data missing or inaccurate? We review the language and the terminology that's been used to identify where updating may potentially be required. And this data is mapped to a bespoke template created specifically for the project. Multi-archive collections retrieve data from different sources, but of course these are rarely consistent. The resources themselves will have been catalogued according to the requirements of the host institution, and they can be presented to us very differently. We can't recatalogue the resources or provide missing data, so the challenge is to ensure the metadata in the final product is as uniform as possible. So we're using metadata to pull the content together into a unified digital collection. The data provided by the source archive or library is supplemented by an indexing process to fully represent the collection at item level. AM editorial staff review the digitized images of each document, and they identify precise and representative terms to provide an overview of the content. Wide-ranging research ensures that the terms are relevant and appropriate. This indexing process doesn't seek to assess the documents nor attempt to interpret them, but rather it builds up a picture of the thematic structure of the collection. And these representative terms are mapped to overarching themes to provide an overview of the collection. So providing access via themes and topics and subjects is crucial, as it enhances the overall discovery experience and retrieval of individual resources. In order to create subject access via browsing, our indexing process needs to anticipate how different user groups will interact with the resource. That's to say, we need to think like the user. How are they likely to approach the database? What themes could be of interest to someone working in this field? And this approach aims to cover all potential user groups, from undergraduates through to experienced researchers, considering the different knowledge, needs, and motivations of each group. Focusing on the user experience ensures that our metadata underpins successful searching and browsing experiences. The themes identified undergo a rigorous refining process to ensure that they fully showcase the collection's content. The data is standardized to provide a clean set of terms for filtering the search results, and the outcome is a bespoke controlled vocabulary reflective of the collection's contents. So combining the inherited data with the results of our in-house indexing processes, the metadata and discovery team craft a formal metadata strategy to determine how best to present the content. And this strategy is agreed with learning and engagement colleagues and the site creation team before being implemented. So returning to thinking like our users, the IFLA library reference model offers us 5 primary tasks, which together define the information seeking behavior of users, and metadata supports all these activities. Firstly, to find. A user seeks something of interest using the available search function. In a library setting, this may simply be their eyes looking at the shelf, but for our purposes, finding is carried out via the search box. Accurate transcription and description is crucial to ensure that the resources can be found within the database. Next, the user identifies. A user confirms that the items located corresponds to what they were seeking. Metadata highlights the unique attributes of each resource, enabling the user to determine which resource they're interested in from a set of results. When selecting, a user reacts to the possible options and chooses to investigate a resource further. They will evaluate the relevance and quality of the resource. AM metadata supports this task by providing supplementary information, for example, the theme, relevant keywords, persons or places of interest, the document type, or the provenance of the resource. Obtaining the resource involves moving from the search results to the item in question. In a library setting, this could be taking it from the shelf. Within an AM collection, the resource can be obtained by simply clicking it to bring it onto the screen. The explore concept was added to the model later, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So focusing on the find task, when accessing an AM collection, users could be conducting a known item search or an unknown item search. In a known item search, the user has a specific item in mind which they're already familiar with. They know it exists and they're simply tracking it down. This approach often uses keyword searching or potentially something more detailed. The user can draw on their existing knowledge to formulate a precise query to find what they're looking for, using information such as the title or creator. They expect to find and identify the resource quickly and easily. By contrast, an unknown item search is about exploring and discovering, and this is where the explore user task becomes relevant. So seeking information and resources with no specific item in mind. The user may not know how to describe what they're looking for, what terminology to use, where to start looking, or whether it even exists at all. In this scenario, a simple keyword search could generate hundreds of hits, none at all, or an incomplete set of results, all of which are frustrating outcomes for the user. In comparison to known item searching, which is a quick and easy task, the discovery process can be open-ended and iterative, leading to browsing related content, discovering unexpected connections, or simply spending time becoming familiar with the collection. Presenting users with a systematic mapping of the collection's themes better supports serendipitous browsing and exploring the collection. Categorizing the resources into topical themes facilitates researching across academic disciplines, identifying connections between content. The themes identified in the indexing stage generate rich browsing pathways, inviting and guiding users to explore the collection in a structured way. These are presented in an engaging way, using relevant images from the collection, and the example on this slide is taken from popular culture in Britain and America. The terms identified in the controlled vocabulary act as filters, enabling users to refine their search results by, for example, topic, era, geographical region, or other features relevant to the content. The controlled vocabulary highlights connections between documents, something particularly useful in multi-archive collections where the materials may never have been previously considered before. Linking related content through metadata, whether it comes from an individual archive or across multiple sources, helps researchers to delve deeper into the collection as a whole. Further navigation aids which we can implement include dividing lengthy documents into sections, enabling the user to move directly to the area of interest, or we can add separators at chapter level. We can identify specific volumes or issues for multi-part works and periodicals, and where it's relevant, pagination to aid smooth navigation through the resource. At AM, we prioritize accessibility. Let me just click through on my slides. There we go. AM, we prioritize accessibility and place inclusion at the heart of the user experience. We enable all users to engage with our primary source content through intuitive user-focused design. We're committed to improving and maintaining this in line with industry standards and accessibility guidelines as outlined on the slide. Metadata supports accessibility by labeling content effectively, including alt text for images and providing clear navigation for users, including those accessing the content via screen readers. The nature of historical primary source materials is that they can often be difficult to read with old-fashioned handwriting, or they could be in a fragile condition which limits legibility. To support user engagement with materials, a searchable transcript is generated for every resource within a collection, whether that's a printed document, a manuscript, an oral history, or a film, and this adds depth and scope to users' research. To generate these searchable transcripts, the in-house indexing described earlier is supplemented by automated processes, such as optical character recognition, or OCR. The process tags the individual characters within a document using XML. The search term entered by the user is retrieved and highlighted within the original document, enabling users to easily navigate between search results whilst viewing the document itself. Manuscript documents are processed through handwritten text recognition, and this uses a combination of complex algorithms and AI to identify handwritten text, again, allowing users to navigate between highlighted search results in the original document. For audiovisual content, a synchronized scrolling transcript is provided and captioning is available. Additionally, an optional audio description track provides a verbal commentary of the key visual elements present in film resources, and the track is synchronized to the video so that the commentary is audible during the natural pauses, avoiding overlap with any dialogue. These enhancements open up a wealth of historical context, commentary, and detail for all researchers and support inclusive teaching and learning practices. As previously discussed, our processes start with existing metadata provided by the source archive or library. Archival collections are by their nature curated and can therefore present a biased perspective. The original cataloging policies will have influenced how those resources have been represented. So we consider how the metadata was created, why and when it was created, and by whom. By asking these questions and understanding the content and context of the source metadata, we consider whether that presentation is still valid and acceptable today. It's not possible to eradicate historical biases from the resources themselves, but we can determine whether the digitized resources can be more effectively described to draw out underrepresented voices and communities within the collections. The initial metadata audit aims to identify outdated or culturally insensitive language within the metadata. Members of the editorial board will be aware of sensitivity issues within the field of research, and their subject expertise is a rich source of information and support. Each collection has a language statement to explain the editorial approach taken with that particular set of resources. Creating bespoke controlled vocabularies for each collection ensures that we align the language with AM editorial guidelines and our efforts around diversity and inclusion. Older collections are also reviewed with this in mind to support equitable discovery. Technology can also play a part in redressing the historic imbalances of representation. Through the application of the handwritten text recognition process, scholars can search the text of manuscripts directly, bypassing any historic bias which may exist in the catalogue data, and this can surface hidden perspectives and voices. As an example, the collection Colonial Caribbean discusses a case study about an enslaved woman, Elizabeth Douglas, who petitioned for her freedom 10 years before the official end of slavery in the Caribbean. The details of her case have existed in the National Archives since 1827, but until recently they lay undiscovered. The collection, as digitized by AM, was indexed at item level, so it could be identified that Elizabeth Douglas also used the name Beto, and here you can see that highlighted within the text. So armed with this knowledge, further research is able to amplify a voice which had not previously been heard. Dr. Christy Warren from the University of Leicester discusses this example further in her video interview within the Colonial Caribbean collection. So to conclude, the breadth and depth of the collections, the variety of materials, and the volume of data require creative and flexible metadata solutions. And this is what makes our work challenging and fun. Our dedicated metadata and discovery team demonstrate that AM is invested in producing high quality metadata to realize the best user experience. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand you over now to my colleague Jen to talk about how we align our in-house metadata processes with the production of MARC records.
Thanks, Gail. So I'm Jennifer Wedge, and I'm the Metadata and Discovery Manager here at AM. My colleagues have described how AM works with and creates metadata during the publication process, and I'm going to talk about how I work with that metadata and adapt it so that it works effectively in library systems. So my role, I'm responsible for overseeing the processes and the metadata that make AM collections discoverable for libraries. This involves creating MARC records and KBART title lists and making sure that we deliver these and other metadata to customers, either directly or via discovery service intermediaries. MARC records are the standard format that libraries expect in order to ingest bibliographic data into their catalogues, while KBART title lists provide structured information about our collections for discovery tools and knowledge bases. Providing these formats allows librarians to easily add their new AM collections to their existing holdings. I joined AM 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, and I have come from a professional library background. Before this, I was working in cataloguing and e-resources librarian roles in UK higher education libraries. So I'm well aware of how important good metadata is for making resources easy to find and use, and how frustrating it can be when this isn't available. Metadata is often the first point of contact between researchers and AM collections, so I see my role as bridging the library and publisher perspectives, making sure that our resources are easy to find, easy to use, and seamlessly integrated into the research environment. So as I mentioned, creating MARC records for AM collections is a big part of my role. MARC, which stands for Machine Readable Cataloguing, is an international standard used by libraries to represent and share bibliographic information. At AM, we produce MARC 21 bibliographic data because it remains the standard format that libraries rely on to integrate resources into their catalogues and discovery tools. The strength of MARC is that it can be used consistently across many systems used by libraries all over the world, and that's what our customers require to ingest. As part of my role, I create item-level records based on international standards, including resource description and access, or RDA guidance. The files are produced in-house using automated processes, but with careful cataloguer oversight, adapting the existing metadata into MARC format and adding structured headings for names, subjects, and organizations. The process begins in a spreadsheet, and this is so I can manipulate data in bulk. I start by separating material types to work on, and then I map the existing metadata to corresponding MARC fields and subfields. I apply appropriate formatting and punctuation, code the control fields, and apply subject name and organization headings in bulk. I can then take those spreadsheets and turn them into MARC records using a tool called MARC Edit. And I can use the tools within MARC Edit to further refine the records and check for any errors before exporting them and making them available for customers. While the work varies greatly by publication due to the kind of types of resources within each of the collections, the end goal is always the same: to create records that clearly and consistently represent what are often quite complex primary source collections, making them straightforward to find and use in library catalogues. So representing primary sources in MARC records comes with its own complications and challenges. And one of the first things that struck me when I started in this role was the sheer scale. Working in a library, I was cataloguing one book at a time, but now I'm working on collections that contain hundreds, if not thousands, of individual resources. This volume forces a constant balancing act between detail and efficiency, and I'm always refining my workflows and automation processes to make sure that our records are as accurate and complete as possible, while still producing them in an efficient and timely way. Bulk editing tools are essential for this work. So using spreadsheets and MARC Edit allows me to utilize functions like find and replace or regular expressions to make consistent updates across large data sets, while still reviewing the output manually for accuracy. Another challenge is the variety of material types, as our collections can include anything from published books to government files, photographs, or oral history recordings, even physical objects. Every MARC record starts with choosing a format that reflects the resource being described, and that choice determines which data elements are appropriate and valid. So when a collection contains a mix of formats, I need to separate them out, and that increases the workload. Also, some formats don't map easily into MARC. And more generally, the flat structure of MARC makes it quite difficult to capture the relationships between the original archival item and the published digital version. Granularity is also tricky. Logically, each document on the platform should have a corresponding MARC record, but in some cases, that level of detail can risk swamping search results. And we're exploring ways to reduce this risk, ensuring that the collections that contain many similar titled items, like diaries or journal issues, we're making sure they can still remain discoverable without overwhelming users with thousands of nearly identical records. And finally, subject analysis presents its own challenges. Applying controlled vocabularies such as Library of Congress subject headings, it's important to both us and our customers to improve discoverability, but primary sources don't always lend themselves to traditional subject analysis. It can be quite difficult to assess the aboutness of an item, especially at scale. And to address this, we've been experimenting with alternative vocabularies such as faceted application of subject terminology, or FAST, and that can offer much more flexibility for non-published material and fits better with the indexing terms that our editorial team use. As soon as MARC records for a collection are finished, these are uploaded to our website and made freely available for librarians to download and ingest directly into their systems, if this fits with their workflow. But beyond making MARC records directly available to our customers this way, we also work with major discovery service vendors to ensure that AM content is properly represented in their knowledge bases and indexes. Discovery interfaces are where many researchers and students begin their searches, particularly at undergraduate level. So visibility there is essential. I supply these discovery vendors with our MARC records, KBART title lists, and in some cases, the full text of resources, which can be ingested into certain indexes to complement the more structured metadata. And this provides even greater discoverability. Once our metadata is ingested into discovery services and made available, collections and their contents can be surfaced in the discovery interface easily without having to manually ingest those MARC files. AM content being present on these discovery services increases the visibility and usage of our collections. It levels the playing field for primary sources that might otherwise be hidden and builds trust by embedding this content in familiar workflows. Over the years, I've developed closer relationships with these vendors, which has led to faster ingest times, more accurate representation of our collections, fewer gaps in coverage, and more efficient troubleshooting. As a publisher, AM engages with researchers, scholars, archivists, and community voices to ensure that our products are informed by expert perspectives. Alongside this, we also work with the librarians who help make our collections accessible to end users. We rely on librarians to tell us what works and what doesn't in their systems when it comes to supplying metadata. That feedback directly shapes how we improve our metadata. For example, we've revisited and reprocessed sets of MARC records produced before my role existed when enhancements were needed. We replace internal keywords with controlled vocabularies, fixed encoding issues, and reworked journal and newspaper collections to better reflect standards for serials. We aim to respond quickly when librarians raise issues or questions and want it to be easy for them to reach us and build working relationships with the people using our records in real library systems. We also work with discovery service vendors and contribute to their initiatives to improve the representation of provider metadata in their knowledge bases. Alongside responding to feedback, we also try to anticipate customer needs, monitoring updates to cataloging standards or discovery service requirements, and adjusting our records before they might become an issue. All of this helps to ensure that our records aren't just providing the bare minimum by being technically compliant, but they are genuinely useful to our customers in the context in which they're being used. When all of this work comes together, the result is that primary sources are easier to find and to use. We believe that they should sit alongside journals, ebooks, and other resources in institutional search tools, so they're not hidden away. Improving the discoverability of primary source material gives students and researchers at all levels more opportunities to make connections and develop critical research skills. by continuously refining our metadata and associated workflows, and by working closely with libraries and discovery partners, we are ensuring that AM's collections remain a reliable and accessible part of the research environment. And I'll hand you back over to Hannah to talk about some of our AI pilots.
Great, thanks, Jen. Yes, so I'm going to talk to you about one specific pilot that we've been doing. But before I do that, I wanted to share with you kind of a framework for using AI-driven processes that we developed in partnership with the archives that we license from, and also, talking to customers and talking to users. So we think it's really important to be very transparent about any processes that we use that do have an AI component. So we document everything that we use or that suppliers that we work with use. And our aim is to share that with our archival partners, with our customers and our end users. So that might be actually discussing that process on the front end of the collection, as well as being very specific in our license agreements. We do not use data retaining large language models. So, for example, where ChatGPT retains the questions that it's been asked or data that's put into it and uses that to train itself, we don't engage with that kind of LLM. We will only operate with models that are closed and use the data once and then don't store it. All of our workflows are AI with human in the loop, so reviewed by human editors for accuracy, for context, and adherence with our editorial standards. Gail mentioned our editorial boards before, so they're really crucial for supporting us in that. And as I mentioned before, any content that is generated by AI is clearly identified for users. We want that transparency, but also we think it's really important for researchers to understand the provenance of any data that they might be using for their research. So to summarize, I would just say our approach aims to be very, very human-led. We think there's a lot of potential for AI to support research and learning, but we haven't yet seen anything that's likely to replace expertise in the near future. So I'll speak to one pilot that we undertook as a case study. And really, we were testing what we could achieve in terms of metadata generation using a large language model. Specifically, we were interested in how that would scale when used consistently across a large collection of primary source documents. We partnered with a company of digital humanists who specialize in data modeling and automatic data extraction and enrichment. So together with them, we created 2 workflows using the OCR generated transcripts that we had for a set of 20th century diplomatic documents. The aim was to extract 3 specific pieces of information for each item. We wanted the people that were mentioned in the item, we wanted the geographic locations that were mentioned, and we wanted subjects. So we developed 2 distinct processes using LLMs to review and analyze the OCR generated transcripts. And all of that was based on an initial manual annotation of the sample set. So we had our in-house team using a sample set, flagging where they saw mentions of people, locations, or just those 2, people and locations, and that trained the model to kind of understand the typical document structures and the semantic patterns that were in the collection. And then the first process used that training and a named entity recognition process to extract names and places from the whole collection. So adding those tags at an item level. And that worked very well. We were able to kind of expand that requirement out as well. The LLM actually automatically identified organizations as well. So we were actually able to add kind of a third field. There was a fair bit of cleanup required in terms of getting names aligned to a single version, for example. As you can imagine, in a primary source, people get referred to all sorts of ways. So identifying where actually sources were talking about the same person. But that cleanup was actually well aligned with the level of editorial oversight that we wanted anyway. The second process then, which was aligned to generating the subjects, was topic modeling. And that took quite a different workflow that analyzed the entire corpus and then created a taxonomy of subjects, assigning the most relevant ones to each item. So it was identifying kind of with everything that it analyzed, what this collection was about. And then combined with the work of our editors, we refined that to a taxonomy, and then the workflow assigned the most appropriate. So in terms of the opportunities that we sort of found from this, the named entity recognition, or NER, was highly effective, and it allowed us to broaden our metadata to include the organizations as well. So that was really positive. The topic modeling, I would put in the challenges column. It was very time intensive, particularly the initial kind of raw data that we had from the analysis that the LLM made of the collection. Getting that to a point of usable metadata was very time intensive. It did give us a high degree of control, and it really did allow us to use the kind of editorial expertise to select the best subject headings, but it was a lengthy process. And the other element of this process was that while the topic modeling was very appropriate for the collection, it wasn't aligned to any bibliographic standards. It was very, very specific. So mapping that, say, to the LOC subject headings that we generate just really wasn't possible. So we're really interested in what kind of LLMs and other AI-driven processes can offer in terms of improving accuracy, specifically kind of completeness of any data that we are extracting, and enhancing the discoverability of sources in the future. We're working on lots more pilot projects. We're really interested, for example, on how LLMs can help us improve the accuracy of the automatically generated transcripts themselves, so optimizing that full text search capability. We're also really interested in how they can help us represent document structure, so whether that's kind of chapters or segments, or even zoning, what different elements there are on a page. There's lots of interesting work kind of out there on that, so we are exploring that as well. And the other kind of AI-driven partnership that we have at the moment is a partnership with linguists who are using LLMs to support translation of metadata for non-English language sources, which we have a little bit of in our publishing portfolio. So that's been a really interesting project as well. And that's everything from me.
Okay, awesome. Great. Thanks so much to Jen, Hannah, and Gail for presenting. We have around 15 minutes for questions. So if you haven't put a question in the Q&A yet, I encourage our attendees to do so. All right, let's jump right into it. Okay, we had a question come in during your presentation, Gail. This is from Moretz. Do you remove any metadata which would now be seen as unacceptable language, or do you store that information?
As I said in my presentation, we do audit the metadata which comes our way, and then we align it with our editorial guidelines. So if there's something that we do not consider to be acceptable, then we will replace it to put something more acceptable within our product. So what we're not changing on a sort of automatic basis is the metadata which the source archive or library has for themselves. So if the source archive chooses to retain that information, then that would still be within their information store. So, but from an AM perspective, we would definitely want the most up-to-date, the most acceptable, the most authoritative language that we can have to describe the resources within our collection. So yes, we would remove metadata, which we would consider to be unacceptable.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, let's see. We had another question come in. I think this is for Jen. It was during your presentation from Anita. Have you considered adding accessibility fields 341 and 532 to your MARC records?
Yes, it's something that we're currently considering. They're kind of fairly new, and I'm kind of assessing how other provider metadata and libraries are covering these, but accessibility is very important to us, and I think having specific MARC fields within our records could be very beneficial, and something that we're looking into at the moment.
Got it. Great. Okay. Let's see. We have a question from Allison that came in, and I think Hannah, maybe you could answer this. What impact has the recent European Accessibility Act, EAA, had on your development plan / roadmap and service delivery?
Yes, yeah, happy to answer that one. Yeah, the EAA has certainly kind of reinforced and accelerated, should we say, some of our accessibility initiatives. We have our AM collections, but we also have our proprietary platform, as I mentioned. So we've kind of got both sides of wanting to make our content and the kind of editorial side of things as accessible as possible, as well as actually as a business kind of having that technology platform and that needing to align with certain standards. The platform itself was designed to meet WCAG standards, but obviously we've also got EAA, which incorporates some WCAG and then has kind of its own guidelines as well. But we've also got the Americans with Disability Act, which we consider because a lot of our customers are US institutions. And again, that has like some elements of WCAG and some additional ones. And the standards as well are kind of always evolving. We're always getting the next iterations, particularly as the WCAG guidelines kind of continue to kind of evolve, and that works really well with how we approach our platform development. It is kind of continuously iterating, so we are trying to look as far as we can kind of beyond the compliance standards and actually looking at sort of WCAG kind of 2.2. Though, as I say, that act has kind of specifically reinforced some of those initiatives, and we did make a very targeted investment last year and this year in our development and delivery, and that has taken a range of forms. There's a lot of really back-end things in our platform to do with how content is ordered, to do with how it's accessed with screen readers and that sort of thing. But we've also made a lot of editorial kind of addition. So we backdated some audio description for our older collections, for example. So actuality footage that didn't previously have audio description now has. We recently undertook a project to enhance our search support for non-English language sources. And there has been a big drive around just kind of transparency and documentation, making sure that kind of our VPATs are, you know, really good, really descriptive and up to date. So in summary, yeah, it hasn't really, the EAA hasn't changed anything specifically, but it has been a really useful framework for us to make sure that kind of what we are publishing and our strategy around accessibility is kind of suiting customer and user needs.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay, we have another question, and this might be for Hannah again, but Jen and Gail feel free to answer as well. This is from Devika. What impact do you think AI will have on metadata and MARC records? Maybe Hannah, if you want to start this off.
Yeah, I might start us off, but yeah, I'd be interested if Jen has any thoughts specifically on MARC. as I say, we've got lots of pilots and there's lots of interesting things going on. I do think the potential for LLMs to help the transcript aspect seems to be bearing a lot of fruit at the moment. But in my experience, one of the challenges is that models are being developed on very kind of specific types of material or specific collections, which is how they work really well. But what that does mean is they're kind of inherently siloed. So how do we, I think the challenge is how do we use this technology and get it to do lots of exciting things for us, but then also keep in mind our aims of interoperable data and actually thinking about our metadata as part of a network rather than just data that we've extracted from these sources that kind of talks to itself. So yeah, I think there's lots of potential at the moment. There's lots of challenges as well. And I think the other challenge for our customers is how do we generate data that enhances the discovery and the research potential without kind of doing too much of the research work in itself. So for example, I don't know, an AI generated summary in metadata can be really great and can be a really great kind of starting point for someone looking at a document. On the flip side, it might be part of that person's assignment to make a summary of the document. So if the AI is kind of already doing that for them, do we run the risk of reducing kind of critical analysis skills, which are what primary resources are so wonderful to help teach? So yeah, sorry, more problems than answers, but I do think it's really exciting.
Definitely. Yeah. Jen, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, from a MARC specific point of view, I mean, it's so hard to predict where AI is going with it. It's moving so quickly at the moment, but I don't see it overtaking or replacing the cataloguer when it comes to MARC records. I think there's so much of that still requires human judgment. I think I can't imagine a situation where I'd be able to just shove all of the metadata that we've got and some AI would magically produce these perfect MARC records by the end. But what I think it is great for is, like anything, it'll be a great tool. I mean, I've used some very small uses of AI in terms of, as I do a lot of work in spreadsheets, it's great to ask it to produce a formula that will work to pull out certain bits of data, and that speeds up my time because I'm not having to do that manually, and I haven't had to spend hours trying to figure out very complex Excel formulas. So I see it really as a tool that can assist and make certain parts of record creation faster. But yeah, beyond that, it's a bit of a mystery.
Awesome. Okay, great. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Patricia, and I think maybe Jen, you could answer this one. How large is your staff to create MARC records? It would seem to be an enormous job considering the massive scale of your collections.
That would be me. I am, I am the creator of MARC records at AM. While I work in a wider metadata and discovery team, at the moment, am the only member of staff that deals directly with MARC records on a kind of day-to-day basis. So it is an enormous job. But yeah, hopefully some of the tools that I outlined are an explanation of how I can keep on top of it.
Really great. Okay, let's see. We have a few more minutes for questions. Let's see. We have a question, and maybe Gail, you could answer this one. How do you measure the impact or success of metadata improvements?
That's a good question. So we always welcome feedback. So when librarians come back to us, possibly with saying this isn't quite right, then obviously we will respond to that as best as we can. Also, sorry, I've kind of lost my notes slightly. Can you come back to me in a moment, please?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Let's see. Do another question. How do you see researchers' expectations around discovery and access evolving over the next few years? And what role should publishers or libraries play in meeting those changing needs? Maybe I'll just open this up to the group if anyone wants to start.
I can speak to that one a bit, I think. Yeah, I think this sort of relates a lot to the AI questions, really, and that kind of, I think that's something that we are going to see as a big change, particularly where, you know, increasingly the kind of undergraduate population are digital natives. They're coming kind of into the research ecosystem, and they're quite used to information being provided instantly and often with an accompanying analysis. Whereas when they kind of hit a primary source, it doesn't typically give you a quick or an easy answer necessarily. So I think, yeah, the kind of challenge for publishers and libraries is how do we kind of engage younger researchers, early career researchers, and provide them like a really accessible entry point that's going to be useful for the questions that they need to answer. But yeah, while helping them and giving them the opportunity to develop the critical reading skills. I think another challenge, certainly that I've seen, is that you know, an early career sort of undergraduate or equivalent has perhaps an assumption that a library catalogue kind of contains all multitudes and that everything is digitized. So actually, like, educating what is available, what portion is digital, and what is kind of missing. And this might sound crazy for me to say as a digital publisher, but actually encouraging students to like look beyond it as well. Like, might there actually be something that's not available at this digital level that would really enhance the quality of their work, you know, catalogues and archives that perhaps haven't been digitized yet, and just kind of, yeah, supporting students in understanding that landscape where a kind of Google search or a keyword search is the default, and perhaps they're not, you know, as used to going further and going much deeper, and that sort of increasingly is a skill that feels like, you know, libraries need to support.
Yeah, definitely. Great point. Let's see. Gail, anything you'd like to add?
On that point about information literacy, I can add something. So within the AM platform, we provide tools and services to enable librarians to better support their users with accessing our databases. We provide tools for to help them get started with sort of new acquisitions, to increase database usage. And then there's also a specific research skills package as well to help provide students with those practical skills about understanding and interacting with primary sources. So yeah, hopefully that is a big help to librarians, and then also onwards to their users as well. But coming back to the question that you asked me earlier about measuring the impact and success of metadata improvements, it is something that's quite difficult to do because there's not an immediate thing, this is right, this is wrong. So people do get to, as I said before, people do come back to us when things aren't right, and we do action that as quickly as we can. So I guess we're also always looking for that sort of customer user engagement to let us know if it is right, or if it isn't. We do have various tools to analyze usage. And yeah, that can sort of help us to work out whether what we're providing is correct or not. But we do also like to have conversations with instructors, and there was a session last year to get feedback specifically from undergraduates. As I said, mentioned before, there's quite a big difference between people who are undergraduates and then people who are experienced researchers, and actually what can we fill in between that to help out with early career students. Yeah, and there's lots of sessions where we, AM as a company, go to conferences, to libraries, etc., to engage with our users and our customers. So, yeah, really, I guess in a nutshell, we're always happy to have any kind of feedback, and then that will help to drive the future improvements of our metadata.
Great, thank you. Okay, it looks like we're right at time, so I'll wrap up and say thanks so much to Hannah, Gail, and Jen for taking the time to speak with us today, and thank you to our attendees for your questions and your comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice with links to the recording and the slides. Also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the webinar and hope to see you again soon on another session. Thanks, everyone.